the work that we've been doing recently, really trying to align our efforts in a world in education where often just the zero-sum time factor in a profession that's really hard, and all the things that we want to be doing with our students can often find ourselves at odds in the work that we're doing supporting students' academic selves and the work that we're doing supporting kind of their social emotional learning selves, knowing that our students every day do not delineate between the two. They bring all themselves with us to school, and trying to find a way in our work as a district in all the things we do, from how we support scheduling at the schools to how we support coaching at the schools to how we support professional learning at the schools.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My name is Janet Courtney, and my special guest today is Adam Zingsheim. Adam is the Director of Pupil Services at Verona Area Schools in Verona, Wisconsin. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So tell everybody a little bit about Verona and what's going on there and your role.
Yeah, so our school district is a school district of about a little over 5,000 students. We are located in the suburban Madison area, the capital of Wisconsin. For anyone that is familiar with Epic Systems, we are the hub of Epic Systems for America here. For those in the medical community familiar with that, and I am the Director of Pupil Services, and so in our district, we are of a size where my position would traditionally be a Director of Student Services position, but with the Director of Special Education and myself have the privilege of focusing on kind of the heart work to support all of the head work happening in our classrooms. And so I get to oversee our counselors and our social workers and our psychologists and our nurses and restorative practice coaches to focus on our learning climate work in our district. And we are a district of 4 neighborhood elementary schools, 3 free of charge public charter schools, one being one of the only Mandarin Chinese programs in the country, 2 middle schools, 1 charter middle school, and then our high school. And so I'm very excited to be with you to talk about some of the work we've done in our learning climate here.
How long have you been there?
So this is my 5th year. This is my 2nd year in my current role. Had been before this our Director of Elementary Education and Early Learning, and before that a principal and a positive behavior supports coach in a nearby district, and all the way back to my time as a 5th grade teacher.
Wow. Congratulations. That's really cool. It's just so fun to see people who have worked hard and gotten to a place where you're making a difference, right? And that is super exciting. So what kinds of, I know you guys are making some changes there. So what kinds of things are you doing to support your team and your students?
Yeah, absolutely. The amazing staff we have in our district, particularly our pupil services team that I get to support, the work that we've been doing recently, really trying to align our efforts in a world in education where often just the zero-sum time factor in a profession that's really hard, and all the things that we want to be doing with our students can often find ourselves at odds in the work that we're doing supporting students' academic selves and the work that we're doing supporting kind of their social emotional learning selves, knowing that our students every day do not delineate between the two. They bring all themselves with us to school, and trying to find a way in our work as a district in all the things we do, from how we support scheduling at the schools to how we support coaching at the schools to how we support professional learning at the schools, to make sure that we are not in any sort of way reinforcing that dichotomy of any time spent on learning climate. Social emotional learning work means less time spent on academics, and any time spent on academics means less time in our social emotional learning work, knowing how important those things are to support each other and supporting our students in the classroom to be able to, again, bring all of themselves with them to be the learners that they can be, to be able to participate, to be able to share, to be able to be challenged, to be able to challenge in our work. And that's really been the focus of our efforts over the last number of years, to try to make that easier for our teachers to do, easier for our pupil services staff to support, easier for our families to understand, and much more aligned.
Wow. Wow, that's great. How much have you seen, and I'm asking this because a lot of people have talked about the fallout basically from COVID, and just the environment and the readiness of kids for learning, and how much more anxiety and how much of that, what have you seen? I just wanted your take on all of that.
Yeah, in our conversation, learning your background as a speech language pathologist, I think it really very much hits home to your expertise. One of the things I think we've seen the most are, um, students' expressive skills. And, for so
Mm,
many students and that group of students, we're now, quite a few years removed from that. And those students moving through the system has shifted our understanding of the importance of just communication. I think
mm-hmm.
some of our students who, in that early toddler age, age 2, age 3, age 4, when they weren't necessarily able to be with people all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
the development in expressive language, the development in problem solving skills, the development of, self-regulation, especially as pertains
Yeah.
to being in groups of people,
Right.
there's no way to mimic that outside of being with people and
Right.
interact. And so I think if anything, it really put a spotlight on the importance of that aspect of development. And I think if there's one thing we've learned of making sure we're attending to that and providing opportunities for students to be together and supporting them through developing problem solving skills, supporting them through challenge, supporting them through all of the interpersonal interaction piece that, as adults, we've had a lot of practice with and learning with and learn from our mistakes and learn from things that work. And to developing that same mindset with students and not
Mm-hmm.
shying away from putting them in positions that they're going to be challenged and might disagree, but actually embracing that and supporting them through that has been something we've really worked to do all the way down to our Verona Area First 5 Years program, where that's a big aspect of our early learning and 4K development. And the importance of play groups in our district, of putting families and students in position to be together, has been something we've been very excited to get back to kind of post-pandemic and continue to emphasize in prepping students for their K-12 lives.
Right. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things as an SLP that absolutely drove me up a wall, and I do not blame any school district and I do not blame anybody for it, but was masks. I was like, what are you doing? You're covering up all of the cues that
Yes.
these little guys
Yes.
need to be able to
Yes.
communicate. And babies learn by looking at your mouth and watching, and then, the cues that they're just lost. I mean, you cover them up and you can't see them. And it drove me crazy. Absolutely drove me crazy.
Yeah, and Janet, the other thing I would add in work that we're specifically doing here, I think beyond finding a way to make this an important part of our daily learning and instruction and support as any other academic area, and seeing that as a part of a larger whole. I think the other thing that we've really worked to do in embracing um, some of our families' needs and particularly access barriers has been looking
Mm,
to see what we can do to situate ourselves to be bringing more therapy options into school for students and families for whom, access might be a barrier for travel time, um, or even just navigating the system. That can be a very tricky thing, navigating the insurance system and trying to find partnerships at all of our levels, at the high school, the middle school, and the elementary level, that work collaboratively with area providers to be able to bring more of that into our buildings in a systemic way, I think has been another thing that we've been leaning into. And we're a few years in, we had a strand at our high school, and last year we were able to lean into that at the middle school level. And grow on that this year to hopefully build towards that full kind of kindergarten through 12th grade option, knowing that that will also support some of our families and our students with skills to
So
cope. Yeah.
give us a little bit more. I want our listeners to really get a little bit more of an in-depth. How do you implement something like that? What have you guys done to
Yeah.
make that happen?
I think the first thing has been taking a real honest look at just where we're spending our time, during the day, and balancing that with a real honest look of what our expectations are on our staff over the course of
Mm-hmm.
the day, and particularly in
Yeah.
in our learning climate work and our social emotional learning world that often, pick any research, topic out there, pick any sort of boxed, support that's out there, any sort of, we go from PBIS and second step back to all the way to tribes, in the 90s, the
Mm-hmm.
idea
Mm-hmm.
of all of it is the same. And, the idea of assume nothing, teach everything, and that we shouldn't be holding students or anyone to expectations we haven't made very clear to them and supported them with. A lot of it has been just giving permission to put that time in. Um, as well as, again, having that honest look about, are we supporting teachers to do that? I think that's often an area
Mm-hmm.
of education that is really difficult to replicate in the pre-service teaching world. And so it's one thing we just expect students and teachers coming into the profession to just kind of do. You just know how to do it, and don't often take that couple steps back to go, how have we actually supported someone to do this? And we end up kind of negatively reinforcing that cycle of expecting our staff to be doing things with students that we haven't actually supported them to be able to do with students through conversations, through opportunities to collaborate together around where, areas of strength or areas of growth might be, and just taking that time, because that's a part of every minute of every second of every day that as adults we're doing when we walk in the
Mm-hmm.
hall, expecting students to, use 0 or 1 level voices. And then who are we as adults? We're the ones yelling down the hallway or colleagues and don't think about the
Yeah.
mixed messages those send and making those things known. In the spirit of the idea of purpose versus control. Are we teaching care, and are we teaching self-reflection? Are we teaching agency, or is this all about, rules? And we need rules in school,
Yeah.
in life,
It's a
or,
balancing act.
helping students be agents in making those, in-time decisions. Well, I could do this or I could do this. Which one is going to serve me better as a life skill
Mm-hmm.
that's going to help us in school, but just in life beyond that? And we have to give that time. And so I think the journey for us has been um, giving permission and support to be taking that time, knowing that that will pay dividends in every single thing we do in our
Mm-hmm.
build.
There is a crisis in this country, a massive shortage of special education teachers. We know how devastating this can be for your students, families, and staff. Lighthouse Therapy places experienced special education teachers in virtual, hybrid, and on-site roles, and we handle everything from hiring to onboarding to mentorship. These aren't just placements, they're professionals who understand compliance, collaboration, and care. Let us help you fill in the gaps with special education teachers who really understand. We are here to help. Visit lighthouse-therapy.com/brighter together to connect with us today.
So what kind of outcomes have you seen so far?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think one, the biggest one, and it's not a quantitative measure. We can certainly
Yeah, I
look
know. Sometimes it isn't. Yeah.
in reductions in physical aggression, right? That's something we're
Okay.
seeing. The reduction in suspension, right? And all of those are very nuanced figures because behavior represents need. It represents some sort of unmet skill. It
Right.
represents, some sort of unmet need. And so that can be deceiving. But I think from a more qualitative perspective, what we're seeing in our students, a willingness to speak up more,
Mm-hmm.
and providing the time and space and skill to be advocating for themselves. And the conversations that we're hearing more, that our teachers are speaking to, that they're having with students, which is where we get into more of that kind of restorative mindset of doing with, not to, um, are seeing in our climate data with our students, which is, it's always a perfectly imperfect measure. Um, Things that we're finding, students are expressing themselves more and are expressing their
Mm.
needs more, which allows us to be more responsive. And in our area, the Dane County Youth Risk Assessment is something we look at the secondary level. And, some of the things our students are speaking up, we're seeing differences in stressors for them. Things like, access to vaping is a big deal. That's something we need to provide support in. Things like social media and AI and all of that students are navigating in time. Our ability to respond to that, because we have students that are coming forth and speaking up more, which speaks to the relationships they're having with the adults, because that's a brave step sometimes to
Yeah,
be
that is. Mm-hmm.
vulnerable and do that. And our ability to respond, I would say we're still early on in that journey. But absolutely are seeing, due to these efforts, really exciting reductions in, I think, physical aggression being one of them, but also we are becoming a district that's becoming much less disproportionate when we look at some of our identified focus groups, our Black or African American students, or students with special needs, or some of our multilingual learners, um, populations of students who our education system is underserved for many, many years. We're seeing big shifts in data, which again, I think speaks to the sort of environment we're providing and the supports we're
Yeah.
providing over serving those students.
Well, and you end up also, I think you're probably going to end up with less students that end up on an IEP, right? I mean, you're supporting them before they even get there,
That's
which
the
is
hope.
really neat.
Yep,
Yeah.
IEPs and 504 plans, trying to provide those support pathways so that when we get to that place, because there are absolutely instances where that is the appropriate next
Right.
step, that
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
that is very apparent. We're not
Mm-hmm.
wondering what might be going on here. We're not
Mm-hmm.
wondering what supports have been provided. We've already done that, so that's the
Mm-hmm.
logical step. Completely agree.
Yeah, that's fantastic because, a lot of people are talking about MTSS and response center, response RTI, response center. We love our acronyms, don't we?
Absolutely.
Multi-tiered system of support and response to intervention, or MTSS and RTI. For those of you that are listening that don't know that, most of the listeners probably do, but we just love our acronyms, so I always try to be sensitive to that. There's also states, there's things that a particular state uses that another state doesn't, but just, understanding that our kids have different needs than, what they did maybe 10 years. So if you think, here you go. Here's a good question for you. So think back to when you were a fifth grade teacher and what you were doing. Now, granted, you were a new teacher, but that experience, builds on itself. But the kids and how the kids were at that time, I've been a therapist for 31 years, and I'm telling you, the kids that I had 30 years ago are not the kids that are coming to me today, and to our therapists today. And you learned really early on to recognize those triggers and those things that upset kids, or when a child just really is not. I don't care how well your therapy lessons is as an SLP, a child comes to you and they're not in that good place. You
Yeah.
can tell immediately. And I love that, because that's that piece that you were talking about, is giving them permission to go, wait a minute, I need to deal with this, because they're not going to take anything that you say in, because they're not able to even focus on that, because they've got so much. And there's times when you just go look at that child and go, okay, what's happening? Let's talk about what's happening. I can turn anything into a language lesson as an SLP, but that's the social emotional. But it's back to my question. I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox there. But what do you see as far as, like, I don't know how many years you've been in education, because I didn't ask you, but I know that you've been up and through and seen. So I'm just curious about what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, great question. And I can answer. I'm entering year 20, so
Oh,
it's
there
been
you
a
go.
little bit.
Okay. You've got it. You've got the years. I
Yeah,
figured you did, but yeah.
and there's probably not an educator alive. I'm certainly one of them that doesn't want to go back and, apologize almost in a way at all, all those students that first year or two, but that's part of the journey. We have to have
It
grace
is.
for ourselves. I think if there's been one evolution that I can point to that, I wish that I could go back in time and embrace a little bit more, is that relational piece,
Mm-hmm.
and the mindset and the idea that, I probably did a little bit too much of this, of, I'm in this position of power and control in a classroom, and not necessarily acknowledging that. And the idea that there are many students that come in and that's just been conditioned to them. There's this person in this authority position, and, I need to listen to them and do what they say because they're in this position of authority, and not thinking more about what's making students want
Right.
to do the things that we're talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
the conversations that we would often have to establish classroom norms and rules and expectations and all of that. And so much of that was a little bit of a farce. It was the
Mm-hmm.
illusion of this mutual conversation. We were doing this, but really I was leading the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mindset has changed. And, for those that it hasn't, would encourage folks to adopt that mindset of really what's making someone want to do the things that I want them to do. And we can all point to people in our lives who, we did because we didn't want to disappoint. It wasn't because we were afraid. That's the power in when you just
Mm-hmm.
point, like, well, pardon me, I will do this because it's you. And,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. And how are we fostering those connections? And I think another analogy I like to use a lot is the idea of, we all have people in our lives, whether it's family or friends, who can say things to us that if somebody else said it, we would just walk away. Like, are you kidding me? And those
Mm-hmm.
hard truths, and that vulnerability and bravery to give somebody a hard truth when you have that relationship. Well, we may never, over the course of a 180-day school year, get to that place with an entire group of students, or even with one student. It's not a binary. We can move down that journey. There's a reason why when, if ever, someone loses a pet or loses a loved one or is going through something hard, our students pick up on that. And
Mm-hmm.
all those are the days where, even in the most challenging environments, where students are just going to go, they're going to go, not today, because they they feel that energy from the adult, and how can we do that more often, and find a balance between showing our true
Yeah.
selves, because we're all humans, and
Mm-hmm.
parents, friends, and children, and all of that ourselves, and find that balance between um, not oversharing, but also being more human with our
Being
students.
real. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
beyond them, moving past that we all sleep at school and only hang out with each other and
Yeah. Yeah.
all of that. We have families and, challenges too. And I think sometimes we shy away from that and miss the opportunities we have when we're asking students to be vulnerable with us, kind of mirroring some of that vulnerability and just building those relationships, because that's the bank account that we all build on when we need to make a withdrawal and do that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to do that when the relationship's not there. It's the foundation of, restorative practices and restorative justice. It's really hard to repair a relationship that never existed in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And it's just a different world. I mean, it just how we approach things in a positive way. I mean, I really think that people that are doing this work and addressing social emotional, we always talk about education loves their buzzwords, but this one, social emotional learning is so key
Mm-hmm.
to our children's success and to this next generation. And there are so many people, and you talk about social media and stuff that you see on social media, and the generation that has not had this support, and the outcome of that, and the needs that adults are having now.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be pretty even keel and got myself together. My husband would laugh at me for saying that, but overall, I manage myself pretty good. I have pretty good executive function skills, all of those things. But there are those out there, and I'm 57, so I'm not young, but younger adults that are just struggling with this, and the fact that we now have a pretty good idea that these are things that need to be addressed before you can even talk about, yeah, we can graduate. You can go through school and get your degree and never deal with the emotional issues that you have as a young adult. And we end up with suicides, and we end up with horrible relationships and divorce and all of the societal things that you see. So I love the fact, and I really am hoping at some point that there will be a recognition by our government and by society and that's why Brighter Together is here, because they need to hear this. They need to hear we are doing the work that needs to be done to help our children so that socially and emotionally and learning wise, they become better society, community people. That's what's the word? I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, and members of society, and it's really great. It's really, really great that you guys are doing that. So
Yeah, thank you. It's we like to think it's like a snowball, building speed downhill. Being in Wisconsin here, again, I don't think I have an accent. Probably all of our listeners are like, oh, that's a pretty heavy Wisconsin accent. But
no,
the
not
snow
bad. Not
references,
bad.
thank you, very naturally. But it's never a binary. Our social workers support in attendance, in being in school more, provides more opportunities for the support that a counselor might provide,
Mm-hmm.
which, helps students feel seen, more, which helps in the classroom when they're in a math lesson, which makes them feel more capable, which, supports small group work a school psychologist might do, take away some of the anxiety, stomach aches that come that our nurses are supporting. And all of that works together to now you have a student who feels seen or heard. They're more a part of their classroom. They're, performing, in an improved way academically, and then they're at school more. And now the connection with the family is improved because, wow, my child is happy at school, so these must be all right people. And now somebody might disclose a need they have, right? That then our team can provide, and the student services teams in school, our staff in school can provide, and all of that supports each other together. There's never one entry point. There are so many different entry points. I think too often we're looking for that one right entry point, and not thinking about all of the many entry points that support each other in starting that snowball rolling downhill that leads to improved outcomes for everyone. And in the end, when students, graduate and move on, whatever it's college career, whatever that is, there's so much research around about the workforce, now. And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, people and employers not finding that communication skills are as strong as they need to be, or the ability to deal with stressors and problem
Mm-hmm.
solving, and forget that that goes all the way back to 4K,
Yeah.
how we're supporting sharing, in a PlayStation. But
Very well said. You put it together in a way. I was trying to get there, but boy, I'll tell you, you did a really great job. So thank you for
yeah.
summing that up, because that's exactly it. That is exactly it. So one last question, because wow, 23 minutes already in, and it goes so fast. If you could, and this is a question I ask most people, if you listen to any of my podcasts, most of it at the end, I ask this question, so you may already know, but if you could miraculously, and you can't say money, solve one issue in your district, just it's gone. It's absolutely gone. I don't have to deal with that anymore in a positive way, right? What would that be? What would that one thing be?
Um, what a profound question. I think I would say continuing to find joy in our profession. I think that
Mm,
the work of education right now and educators sometimes can feel under attack.
mm-hmm.
And certainly, we have an amazing network of support within our local community, and so I know we have a little bit of a buffer from that, from maybe some other areas of our country. But um, I think the idea of meeting high support and high expectations, right? That's the balance we're trying to strike. And I think right now it's being an educator is difficult. We have a lot of high
Yeah.
expectations that we place on our educators and that they in turn place on their students. And the pressure we put on ourselves to support improved outcomes. And often those are on the academic side, because very often those are the gatekeepers to college. Those are the gatekeepers to opportunities and scholarships, and the cyclical
Mm-hmm.
nature of that, and access to higher education. And too often, I think sometimes we do that at the expense of joy, and
Mm,
forget how fun it is to be in this profession, how
yeah.
fun it is to be with students. And if we could find that balance, and continue to give permission for our educators to find that balance, to do the things curricular wise that we know we need to do to prepare our students for, life after our, 4K through 12 system, and to do that not at the expense of joy, I
Yeah.
think would
That's
be the
great.
one we think need to
Yeah.
continue.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I'll tell you, I've been, like I said, 31 years, and I get to do it. I love every single day. And I've said this on the program before, find what you love and do that, because I mean, man, it's not work when you love what you're doing. It's really
Mm.
not work. And the fact that your school in Verona is giving that back to your teachers and giving them permission to love what they do and to work with the kids and not feel like they've got a hammer hanging over their head. Don't step out of line. It's so good, because it's gonna, and you know it already is. It affects the whole system, and that's fantastic.
Yeah,
So where
thank
do
you.
they find you, Adam? Where do they find Verona Public Area Schools, and you? How do they find you?
Yeah. So the Verona Area School District, you can Google us. Director of Pupil Services, Adam Zingsheim. I'm probably the last person on every alphabetical list that exists.
Yeah,
But geographically, we are minutes away from the state capital, Madison. We are just south on the southwest side of the Madison area here in Dane County, and come visit us. We'd
yeah.
love to have you. Love to show you our district. Love to talk about our work. And appreciate the opportunity to be joining you today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure. I knew it would be from the minute that you got on, that we were going to have a great conversation. And thank you so much for being on Brighter Together, because we're brighter together.
Yes, thank you.